The U.S. government has released new video of a San Diego detention center. It is a place where undocumented immigrant children are being held, separated from their parents. Megan Roberts joins us now. So Megan, what are we learning about the facility in San Diego?
Natasha, the first thing that the children are told when they enter this facility is that it is not a detention center. That is a phrase that is being used a lot in the United States right now to describe these facilities that are holding these migrant children. This facility is in San Diego. Let's take a look. You can see the images there on your screen. Journalists were allowed inside, though these images are released by the government. There were no cameras or phones allowed inside the facility. So you can get a glimpse of what life is like for the minors that are in there right now. 63 total, all boys ages 6 to 17 years old live in this facility. Now, if siblings of different sexes are brought to the facility, they are separated. The girls go somewhere else. In San Diego in particular, there are 2 smaller facilities where the girls will be housed, and then siblings are allowed to see each other about once a week. In terms of talking to their families, officials say that it sometimes takes about a week for the children to be able to find their families. And then from there, they get 2 10-minute phone calls a week to family members. There's also in that facility a phone booth. And that phone booth is actually used for kids who want to report abuse of any kind. It's a phone booth that kids can use at any time, and it's designed to allow them to report abuse. There's also been a lot of questions about where the very young children are going when families get separated, because there are some toddlers, there are descriptions of babies being separated, and we have learned that they go to a facility in Arizona, so one that's different from this, perhaps better equipped to have young children in its care. There are over 100 facilities like this in the United States. Usually they're used to help house minors that are crossing the border by themselves. But now we have this new category of children who have been separated from their families, and we're learning that an additional 1,600 beds across the country are being prepared to house these children, Natasha.
You know, the story is getting a lot of attention, Megan. Put into context, how many children are we talking about here?
We finally got some concrete numbers, and we know that 1,995 children were separated from their families in a period of 6 weeks. That is between April the 19th and May 31st. That is about 47 children a day. This is coming from the Department of Homeland Security on Friday. Just to put that into context, we were reporting about this earlier this week when journalists were for the very first time allowed in one of these facilities. And at that time, officials that worked with these kids in these facilities had estimated there were perhaps around 500. And now we have this concrete number. It shows just how many more children than even people working with these kids thought are in these facilities. So again, that number is 1,995 in a period of just 6 weeks, Natasha.
Okay, thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
You know, over the past few days, we've had the opportunity to bring you the perspective of the lawmakers pushing for the detention centers, from journalists who've had the opportunity to go inside, and even from representatives of the refugees describing what these centers are like. But now we have the opportunity to get an inside perspective on how this is playing out for the men and women who are enforcing the immigration policy in the United States. Jim Goldman led the Elian Gonzalez raid in Miami 18 years ago, one of the biggest news stories of the time. First off, Jim, thank you for making time for us today. I want to get your perspective on how things are playing out in the U.S. today, but because you've been on the front lines, you were a former immigration agent. How exactly does the process work? We have this image of men running in with guns, ripping children away from their families. How do you get your orders? How do you get deployed? How does this process work?
Well, there's always been various policies regarding the handling of children that have entered the country unlawfully. Today, this has become more of an enforced policy. And first of all, I can't imagine anybody in American law enforcement that's taking any type of pleasure in separating children from their families. It's not something that I'm sure most of these agents have signed up for. I think that it's not necessarily working as a deterrent. Obviously, the statistics that you mentioned earlier, it seems like there's an increase in families attempting to enter the border without inspection. However, something needs to be done. At least the administration is taking a firm position in enforcing immigration law, which is long overdue and certainly needs to be enforced. But it seems as though The persons suffering most from all of this are families that are non-criminal in nature and are simply coming to this country, albeit unlawfully, but coming to this country for the purpose of employment in bettering their lives. And the persons suffering most from it all apparently are the children at this point.
So tell me what you think about the current policy. If it's not acting as a deterrent, people are still coming, and it's the families who are suffering. Where is the disconnect? How do you make the process work?
Well, everybody that enters the country unlawfully obviously is involved in a criminal action. Entering this country without inspection is a crime. If the U.S. government opts to enforce that and prosecute you for entering the country unlawfully, that's the right of the government. In the past, people that have entered without inspection were never criminally prosecuted unless they were repeat offenders or had previously been deported. If the government's going to take a firm stand and actually prosecute people and, formally remove them through deportation proceedings, it's probably not a bad idea. However, there are these children, and there's a big difference between children that are 6 and 17. And to think that they're living in the same environment in custody, separated from their parents, who are in a judicial process that could take some time, I have some concern with that. I know that the U.S. government could, if they wanted to, detain families as a unit, and these units could then be put through the process collectively.
So why do you think they're not taking that approach? Why separate young children from their parents?
I don't think they're prepared to do anything else. In the past and historically, many people that have entered this country unlawfully have been given the opportunity to agree to be voluntarily removed or returned, meaning instead of facing any type of formal proceeding, they would sign a form and simply be removed somewhere near the end of the shift. And the Border Patrol would then remove these people who have already agreed to it. And they could do that with a mother, a father, and other family members. Now that they've opted to prosecute people for entry without inspection, they have to make some type of provision to detain the entire family. But there's still a due process. Whether or not they're going to be entitled to bond hearings or released on bond, that's all up to the process, the courts, okay? Unfortunately, these processes can take a long time. There are people that have been in this country for years under deportation proceedings and have never been successfully removed. And rather than get removed, then they enter into some type of immigration fraud scheme. They apply for some type of an immigration benefit, and ultimately they receive the benefit. So you start your career here entering without inspection, and many years later you're applying for United States citizenship because you've managed to circumvent the law and receive a benefit that you were never entitled to. They're trying to prevent that. Unfortunately, the people that are suffering most from that now are children between the ages of 6 and 17.